One thing that I think is different about the Matrix is who is making the rules aren't really the players. There are some other players or architects that are creating the context that the players are playing around inside of, and it's not diplomatic or co-created. It's essentially like, this is the deal. And maybe that's by accident over time, or maybe there's some bad actors who, eat babies or and have lizard brains or whatever. But like, sense of like the people that are inside of that context are not really choosing the rules of the game. They're just like, the party was going on before we got here, and now it's reality.
The container is now open, and we bring you Rob Kancler, none other than, Rob Kancler does amazing work with men, often entering through the doorway of getting, having, and making better sexual experiences, and using that doorway has a way for men to like discover so much about themselves and the universe and the other. And I know a lot of that because I actually have been in a Men of Substance cohort that Rob Kancler has been leading. And we'll have a bunch of plugs in the show notes below and at the end of the podcast. But I think that gets a pretty good bite in what Rob Kancler does. What he's a man of substance, no doubt. But today we've talked to you a lot explicitly about sex and sexual mysticism on the container, but then today we're kind of using a lot of your knowledge to look at a slightly different thing, which is something online is often referred to as the Matrix, and like escaping the Matrix. And yeah, I'm noticing like what just comes up for me immediately is that this is really important to me right now, is learning how to get out of all of the kind of ideological traps and games of society to sort of be more at choice in my own life. Yeah, and so that is what we're gonna cover today. But before we do that, Sai, you want to pitch the Patreon for viewers?
Yeah, we love our patrons, and there's like so much gratitude for people who are taking this leap to make a small monthly donation to support the show. I was actually just looking it over the other day, and I was like, this is amazing that there are people that are willing to like take the time to click the button and just, donate a little bit of money each month for this incredible content. And so, yes, please, please, please sign up for the Patreon. It's a wonderful way to exchange energy and to show your support and appreciation for the container.
That's right. Patreon.com/the container. And now, drum roll, please. Rob, enter the space. I want to hear your voice come in here.
Okay. Hello, hello. I'm curious what's going to happen here. Here we are looking at two friends on a screen and imagining that some other people are going to listen to it in the future. What a weird moment in the universe. Nice. Yeah, so the topic is juicy. I think it's also pretty broad, to say the least. There's so many directions that we can go, and spend a lot of time thinking about, talking about, teaching about stuff related to sex and embodiment and intimacy and relating. And that's definitely an area where we can look at like what might be relevant to people versus like what's the like thing going on around. And yeah, I've also been spending a lot of time learning about law and the difference between common law and statutory law and the matrix that we live inside of, quote unquote, as it relates to this kind of big illusion that we live inside of and how that relates to taxation and corporate law and agreements, and that's a rabbit hole. So maybe we can spend some time with that too, because it's some information that I'm and by no means an expert in, but I got the bug. I got the bug. Somebody that I really respect was like, I don't pay taxes. And I was like, okay, that's a bold thing to say publicly on the internet where you have something like 300,000 followers.
Huh.
And he's like, yeah, I haven't paid taxes in like 8 years. I make millions of dollars a year. I don't pay taxes at all. And yeah, so I was like, okay, what is he talking about? And yeah, I learned who he learned from and have been kind of playing around with that so I can share some stuff that I think the listeners might find interesting and maybe you too as well. And yeah, we were jamming a bit in the Men of Substance Discord about what might we want to play around with today. So curious to see what one unfolds.
What immediately jumped out for me uh is the law framework first. Yeah, and I like have a really hot
Yeah,
is
it's a big one. It's a big one.
yeah.
It's a big one.
So yeah, there's like a frame I want to introduce because I think that this is like a good way to talk about the Matrix. Is the Matrix is one way you could think about it as it lives in the world, is that it is a game that we established amongst each other. A game being like a container with set rules and
Yes.
expectations, and there are roles, and those roles are scrutable because we have the container of the game. But people have been born and raised and died inside of that container for so long that like people forgot it's a game, and it became so constitutive of people's like central nervous system mapping and like social field orientation that it actually like it is the Maya. It is the like Archon grid that you have been stuck in. Um, there is if you really want to play around with how quickly this actually works in your own body, uh, there's this game called Gnomic where basically it's like the rules are that you go around and each person suggests changes to the rules and then everyone votes on it uh if those rules pass, and that's the only rules, and those rules can be changed or deleted based on people's their rounds. And games of Gnomic have this tendency, if they go on for more than about 2 hours, to become these like extended virtuosic like group um soliloquies on what it means to be alive and to exist and what the purpose of being together is. um yeah, and like that's a game that you can play at, you can like go to the bar and play that game with like a couple of friends. But we basically did that on a level of civilization for is that 15,000 years now? What's I'm not sure the how
I mean,
long.
that's even a big thing is like within the Matrix, there's a certain, I mean, and it's like I use this phrase a little tongue in cheek and also just for like ease of conversation. But like, that's even up for debate, right? Like they're in the archaeological, anthropological information and conversations that are coming forward is also like pretty unclear or leaning towards like, no, civilization is way older than we were taught in school and is even the primarily kind of established narrative. Like, yeah, from some vantages, it's like, yeah, civilization is about 3,500 years old or something like that, or maybe 5,000. And then some others are like, no, maybe it's 25, 45,000. And here's some evidence of some wild shit that is from a very long time ago that suggests supremely advanced technology. And we don't remember. And all that shit is gone for the most part, except for some of the cool stuff they made. So Yeah, and you just said so much stuff. I'm taking a couple notes here, and maybe I'll just forget about them and not get to it, but maybe it will be helpful because, yeah, like 19 fireworks exploded during your little share there. So cool. It seemed like maybe Sai wanted to say something too.
Yeah, I was, as you were describing that, I was remembering a time that we in our community played a version of Gnomic, and within, it was like a 4 or 5, maybe a 5 hour event,
Mm,
and things got so far out so quickly. We were two groups of like maybe 8 people, and we called the game Wood Y'all,
mm.
right? And so you had to like, make decisions. And I mean, we were like in a coffee shop, kind of like almost at war with each other as part of this game as it unfolded. And I mean, it took me a full day to get myself in back into, well, the regular matrix out of that matrix. And it's just it was like so powerful, um which speaks to, the power of however many years, even if it's only 3,500. This was a 5 hour event, and I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, and if you like go to Burning Man or whatever, and you're in this totally different field of social code, I know that a lot of people talk about this almost like they like open doors for other people to have meaningful experiences when they leave the burn, and then they crash. And there's this like post playa depression phenomenon that I've heard many people speak to where they're just like, oh my God, I feel so alone and this sucks. What are we all doing?
This really speaks to the exact reason I wanted this topic when we were like throwing around possible topics, and this one felt really alive for me, is like especially in the work we do, there are these moments where you pierce the veil and you see with clarity the freedom that's possible, and like then you get dragged back in, and there is a such a desire in me to live my life um outside of that particular game, of like, I don't know, whatever. I mean, there are many onion layers to the game, because like Western civilization isn't even the whole thing, but like being at choice and being able to create our own games that we're able to enter into and exit out of. These are, um, yeah, deep yearnings that I have, and that you're just mentioning, like when people go to like Burning Man or like circling retreats, and it's like we could live this other life, but it like, yeah, somehow we find ourselves plugged back into the matrix, and we're
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson back at the desk.
It's super rich. I'm both with this like desire to be conversational and just kick it with you guys, and I'm also just like I could just monologue for probably 45 minutes. So I'm kind of like, all right, here we go, we're cooking. Um, yeah, it's super interesting. And what's up, Sai?
I
What's
was just like, excited.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of energy moving in me for sure. Cool. Well, yeah, I mean to bring in a law analogy here, there's an analog with the term jurisdiction, where it's like there's a matrix and there's implied jurisdiction. It's like this is our life, right? Like this is what it's like to be a person, right? Like you opt in, don't you? And then there's questions around why that come up for me. Like why is that the predominant context that people opt into or assume that they are intrinsically a part of, and how I think a lot of people are not even aware of it, which I think is what you're getting at, if not saying pretty directly, Jonathan. So yeah, it's interesting. And I would guess that one of the main, at least top of mind reasons that people might feel like they need that is money.
Yeah.
Like they need that. I have to sell my soul to the devil to provide for myself and for my loved ones. Like I have to, especially people that are not entrepreneurial in their, orientation or focus or whatever. It's like I need to plug into that thing, however horrific it might be and misaligned with my values, because I need stuff. And because of our disconnection from community and from the abundance of nature, we assume that the reason why we're okay is because we've tapped into that thing. And the game, different from what I'm understanding you guys are talking about. What is the name of the game that you were just describing? You said it several times. I don't remember.
Nomic.
Nomic. How do you spell that?
Nomic.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
there's this other game in authentic relating circles called Woodjaw
And Kingdom.
and Kingdom. That's right. It
Yeah.
was Kingdom. That's right. Yeah.
But through a Woodley lens. Yeah. Anyways.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, the word king and kingdom even gets into some different frames and like mythopoetic frames or different kind of structures, sociological structures. Um, yeah, I'm just glancing over at my notes here and kind of organizing my thoughts because it's so broad and yeah, let's start moving. One thing that I think is different about the Matrix, to just call it that, maybe I need to stop giving a caveat when I say that and just call it the Matrix. Um, Yeah, one thing that I think is different about the Matrix than these games that you're describing is who is making the rules aren't really the players.
Mhm.
I have this story that is a very critical distinction. Is that like there are some other players or architects that are creating the context that the players are playing around inside of, and it's not diplomatic or co-created. It's essentially like this is the deal. And maybe that's by accident over time, or maybe there's some bad actors who, eat babies or and have lizard brains or whatever. But like that's yeah, maybe not really the point. It's just the sense of like the people that are inside of that context are not really choosing the rules of the game. They're just like the party was going on before we got here, and now it's reality, right? Is kind of the premise. And there's a taking for granted that is almost ubiquitous that people are just like, oh, these are social codes and yada yada yada. And um, something that I've seen, which is super trippy, is like learning pickup can sometimes kind of crack people's relationship with the matrix because you have to break all of these social codes to get into these kind of social engineering experiments. If you're looking at, and this is something that we had in our notes of like looking at like what works rather than like what is a part of this kind of so these social norms and these ideological commitments. What works? Because if your goal is related to seduction, for example, or whatever, attraction, you have to get out of that kind of premise of behavioral agreement. um yeah, and then this other piece, in addition to money, belonging is obviously relevant. Fear of rejection, stuff related to self-worth, I think is huge. That I think this we were talking about this in Men of Substance recently, that there's such a big piece related to worth, self-worth, and self-esteem, and this kind of externally driven way of forming our identity and our sense of our own worth, right? And I think that people are trying to like make sure that they are transacting things around their own worth and how that relates to safety. And yeah, it's a big thing. Like if we were to just actually do whatever we want to do, we're not going to be okay, I think is maybe one of the underlying subconscious things that's going on for people. Of like, if I were to actually just like live in a way that's aligned with what I want and what feels good for me and what's related to my values and how I see the world, then I would inherently separate myself from the fabric of my sustenance, basically. My needs for material things and for belonging and for connection and validation of who I am. Sex obviously is very relevant here. Shame, grandiosity, the gap between what people want and what they end up living, and the amount of regret that people feel at the end of their lives retrospectively. Gets pretty broad for sure. And then there's the law thing that we didn't get to yet, which is cool.
Yeah, it's certain. There's a lot of resonance for like recent events in my own life where I have this gift of like having more choice about what I want to do and be than I have in ever. And so I'm hitting this wall of like, oh, it's not just this on-off toggle. It's similar to when I first started uh work with like circling and authentic relating, where I was like, oh, my needs aren't being met. And then I immediately realized like I don't actually know what my needs are. Because I've spent my whole life like, oh, my needs are less important than other people's needs, or, you know, doing like the mothering kind of like, oh, my children's needs
Mhm.
are always before my needs, or,
Yes.
you know, and so it's similar with like, oh, if you could really do anything you wanted to do, it's like it has to be, at least for me, it's like this journey of getting used to that even being like it's always been true in a way, but there were all these things. The Matrix was really holding me in so many ways, and there's like kind of a release around it now, and it's I'm like all over the place. It's not, I'm like less settled than I've been in years. I'm, you know, like monkey mind, and you know, my addictive tendencies are coming back in, and some of my old unhelpful thinking routines are back online, and you know, and I'm realizing, oh, this is like a really big part of the journey of stepping out of the matrix, is like figuring out what it's
Mm.
like to be in this kind of limbo space or something.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's such relevance in sex. What you're talking about is such a big thing in sex that I've been seeing with a lot of the folks in the program and in other contexts. Like, yeah, you guys want to talk about something juicy for a bit? Let me turn on the air conditioning here. It's getting toasty. We got the Jack Black spirit animal in full regalia there.
Yeah.
My camera thing is doing the weird. Let's get it back to. I don't. It's like it's funny, these little AI camera things. They do their own thing.
Mm.
Yeah. So, are you getting sound from the AC or no? Just on my
Yep.
side. This is getting pretty specific. What I'm feeling my way into here. So you said something that I think is really common for people in sex and specifically women. And um, Pia Melody has this really cool idea. These three different, we talked about this recently, Jonathan, these three different kind of ways that people outside in their self-worth and their self-esteem. And that like I have worth because you say I do is one of the most primary that plays for women, men too, but you know, we get different flavors. It's fun. And I've seen something profound happen with women when they can really feel their own sexuality and their own pleasure and their desire as something that is independent from how it might relate to their partner's experience. And not to say that there's like an inherent selfishness. There's a complexity there that I think will clarify as we unpack this. But um, something opens that has so much more truth and sincerity and aliveness when a woman can connect to her own pleasure, her own sense of enjoying herself, and her interest in sex being about her interest and not about the other person or some kind of transactional piece. And this is true for everybody, regardless of gender. But it's like there's an interesting flavor that I've seen that feels pretty gendered here, like man-woman dynamics, where um, this is the first time I think I've spoken about this publicly. So I'm like, different feeling. The way that I experience this in practice is like there's like a layer of performance, there's a layer of like my experiences for somebody else. rather than like, I'm here because I really like this and this is my experience and these are my desires, this is my interest, as something that is disconnected from, let's say, the matrix of our sexual culture and the transactionality of it and how that's rooted in unworthiness. Um, and how much aliveness and ironically, how much more enjoyment that the partner usually receives when that is flowing. I think usually is not even a necessary thing to say. The amount of energy flow, the amount of Shakti, the amount of dilation and safety and coherence that can come into an intimate exchange when there's this sense of really being connected to ourselves and not being enmeshed in this kind of codependent entanglement or this codependent transaction where like my pleasure and my orgasm and my sounds and my desire are at least slightly transactional. It's here because I want love and I want approval and belonging and acceptance. And yeah, I think so. Another thing within this framework that I was referencing from Pia Melody is that um, men are so performance based. It's very typical for men's sense of worth and self-esteem to be associated with their performance and their ability to get things. So that's such a sinister combination of men being like, oh, if I like perform correctly, then I'm worthy and I matter and I have value. And then women being like, oh, and if uh, I have value because another says that I do, that's such a way where people, I think, delude themselves into a kind of performance where there's an exploitation, like there's a sense of self-abandonment in a transactional exploitation. And I think that this is a primary mode that people have sex in and don't see it as such because, sex can be exciting and that transaction has satisfaction on a certain level. Like it feels good on a certain level, especially when you have not experienced like the thing that is outside of the matrix. It's just like, oh, like I'm horny and I'm being gratified and this is cool. And yeah, to point back to this piece of like the purity and the vibrancy and the aliveness and the flow that comes with this kind of sovereignty when men and women or whoever's having sex with whoever is um, free, when there's a freedom that like I'm here because I want to be, I'm here because this is about me. I don't owe you anything, I'm not trying to get anything from you. And yeah, this is something that I kind of like wish people experienced, that they could understand the difference here, because it seems like it is a kind of thing where like once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like this, like, oh wow, like here's the ways that I abandon myself and I transact and my sexuality is for another person. And there's a nuance here that I think is important to clarify because I do think that selflessness in sexual exchange and exploration is critical. And that is not what this is about for people who are listening. It's like that is not what this is about. There's a paradox. We talk about this a lot in the work of like the selfish, selfless paradox, where like I enjoy you because I like it. And the more that you enjoy yourself, the more I enjoy you. So for me, selfishly, there's only one way to go. And that's a very profound thing to realize, especially when we're outside of this transactional mode. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff here around let's say, the matrix of our sexual culture and this intersection of shame and self-hatred and unworthiness and existential fear, kind of creating this matrix where people are in a distorted reality. They're in a distorted field and they don't really understand the difference between their essence, like their essential self, like who they really are, and all this stuff, like all this shit that just plays because there's not contrast. Humans learn through contrast. And when you have not experienced something else, it's just the water we swim in, right? It's just like, oh, that's how it always is. I don't know anything else. So, you know, like what's there's this funny metaphor. I was telling somebody about this and they're like, A fish says to another fish, "Oh, the water is warm today." And the other fish goes, "What's water?"
Mm.
It's this, you know? Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, there's such a good uh version of that, of like, wow, the Matrix is this today. It's like X today, you know? Like
Mhm.
things are getting really spicy here in the Matrix. And then, well, what is it? And there's like kind of a yeah, I really like the way you're talking about with contrast, as like the way that you have to at some point get a parallax view of like, oh, I see that it could be something else. Like
Mm.
even knowing that yeah, that any of that stuff was up for choice. Um, yeah, it's the secret menu, you know, at the restaurant. It's like, I didn't even know you had anchovies back there. Are you crazy?
It's almost like we're on a merry-go-round, and it's like you can orient to the other horses bouncing around and the other people that are like on the merry-go-round, or you can be like, oh yeah, there's like a world that's not spinning around in circles.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, yeah, it's hard to get off of a merry-go-round, right? People are like, I'm sure there's tons of videos on the internet of people being like,
Right.
You're like, how do I get off? It's like, just stay on the merry-go-round forever. It's like, oh, well,
And it
there's
would
also
be
the
even
world.
right. I mean, it would be even harder if getting off the merry-go-round was something that every authority figure in your life, yeah, your entire time on Earth, they had been saying that is the worst thing you could do. And like if you do it, there's something wrong with you, or it's like not even possible, or like
Mm.
why are you like that's such a childish.
Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap here. My years kind of in utopianism.
And
You know, I
cults.
really
Cults and religions come in too, where it's like, I'll be your authority.
yeah,
Get off the fucking merry-go-round. You
right,
know?
right. But then what do you get? Yeah, like I'm thinking back, like in my 20s, these years spent like staying up all night on speed reading advanced Marxist theory. And like these like psychotic notes that I would take and like all these like brain maps. And it was like that stuff, like the Frankfurt School critical theory stuff is so good at getting you out of the matrix, like the one with the little copyright symbol next to it, like the big one. It's good at getting you out of. But
But
then it's like,
can
but
you,
then you're
can you
in
clarify
another.
that? Like, what do you mean by the big one? Like, are you talking about economic and like socio-political superstructures? Because, yeah, because it's like, it's deep, right? Because there's like religious ones that are like kind of existential of like who and what are you, or whatever. And then there's another where it's like, what is like, how does it relate to authority? How does it relate to material needs? Like, how does it
Right.
relate to belonging? That, yeah, yeah. Curious. Can you break that down?
Yeah. But when I said like the matrix, it's sort of like in the competing world of matrices, there are dominant ones and less dominant ones and like more locally dominant ones. And I think kind of the one I'm thinking of is sort of the like scientific materialist, capitalist realist sort of like um yeah, Walmart parking lot ideology. Like the Walmart parking lot conception of the universe and of being. Um and like a complaint I have about the off ramps that critical theory gave me is that actually the way critical theory works, you have to have another matrix to escape to because of the nature of the philosophy. So it's like you it's like you to get out of this one you have to like adopt another one in a way.
I think that that's totally true when we look at law, for example, and we look at like common law and statutory law and tax liability and all that shit. Like that's very real, right? And or at least if you want to like have a way to do commerce. But another thing that I can just put on the table here is like if we're looking at like levels of influence or whatever, like what are the most consequential layers of matrices or something? Like I've seen a lot of people that get out like that kind of break the mold. They like read a lot of Chomsky or like Marxist theory or something, and then they're just kind of like, oh, like that's all made up, whatever. Like we should all, yeah, I don't know, whatever, whatever layers of like alternative socialism or something that people can grok and you know get fantastical about. I see that, but then a lot of people that get that seem like they're still really matrixed to make up a verb, that they're still super matrixed in these other ways. So for me, like one interesting thing would be like what like exiting the matrix moves get you out of more shit, basically. Like how can I be like, okay, if I like if I have like Morpheus like unplug my fucking brainstem from that one, does it concurrently unplug me from all kinds of other stuff, or is it still not the real world? And people that really nerd out in the Matrix movies like, is this just another construct or whatever? So that's interesting to me. And I have a theory of like what is the like unplug of all unplugs.
What is it?
Yeah, right. But maybe we should save that and talk about the law and money thing because that's
No,
super interesting. But then, like, yeah, we got open loops here. But I'm curious, right? Just to hear your take on this too, because it's like, yeah, we could say that the like through certain kind of orders, that these higher order things that relate to like sociopolitical structures and capitalist structures and whatever, that it's like through a lot of people's lens, they would be like, oh, those are the big ones, right? But it's like, yeah, there's so many people that unplug from that are like, I don't want to hang out with them. It's like, I don't want to make love with those people. So like that's an interesting thing, right? Like I don't want to, I don't resonate with those things. But what is, at least for me, or maybe not even at least for me, like what is the thing that, as I'm just being redundant now, but like you pull the plug on that and then you take the whole cake.
Excited about this. Okay.
So it's like self-realization, government, taxes, fucking Chomsky. We're all over the map here. Sex, orgasm, selfishness.
It's the container, baby.
Oh yeah.
That's
Okay.
It's a big container.
Cults. Don't forget about cults. Okay.
Current as of this afternoon operating theory of this is this idea of ultimate transparency. And what I mean by that is the inner work cleaning up so much that then the outer is like becomes less and less of the matrix, because it's like the simple idea of projection, like you're seeing in the world like what's actually in you. And so it's if I can like balance the inner with the outer, then there's like transparency, and I can see there's the matrix just dissolves because I am like humming with a different like vibration of the universe. So I'm like seeing,
Yeah.
I'm not even seeing the
Yeah.
bullshit and the stuff anymore
Yeah.
because it isn't in
Yeah.
my, not in my,
Yeah.
there's no books you have to read for it,
Yeah.
which is
I
nice.
totally.
For some people,
Some people.
Totally. So, I mean, I think I agree with you and I feel what you're saying and like resonate with it personally. Or that's not the right way of saying it. Like when I hear you, I'm like, hell yeah, that's dope. Like I like that for you. And I like that for me or whatever. But then I'm also just like, oh, how many people have thought that that they were doing and did some like wild shit that was like probably pretty bad. Is that they were like, ah, I'm like, freeing the zoo animals or whatever. Or like That's a ridiculous thing, but like, like what, like wokeism and like identity politics, people probably think that that's what they're doing. And I imagine that a lot of people that are doing really like extremist stuff that from another vantage just looks like crimes against humanity probably have a similar story as well of like, oh, we are the righteous ones who see clearly and like yeah, so there's something there that's super trippy of the boldness of like radical views of being like, I'm so free to like see the divine truth of things, and even though everyone is crazy, I'm right. So here's my move. So there's that. That's interesting for sure. Um,
And scary.
It is scary, and I think this is part of the value of community, like one of the most important things of community. But then that also gets scary because then communities can get insular and like echo chambery, right? And then that can
And
ease
they make a matrix.
totally, yeah, yeah, and build momentum in a very unhinged direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is really wise, Sai. I think that this is reliable, like something about like um Gandhi said something like that, like. I don't remember his exact thing, but it was something along the lines of like when I could totally be misremembering this, but someone was like, "What's your model for change?" And he's like, "Live in community for 10 years to purify the self and then go change the world," or something along these lines of like, yeah, do the work and do the work with other people. And when you're really like clear and able to maintain healthy relations and have a stable mind and body, then like pick up a mission, do something meaningful.
Yeah.
I think that that's important. And it's interesting to look at like young people who uh, get really impassioned. And I think that that passion is important, but it's often rebellious. It's not purpose based. It's anti based. And that's also confusing because sometimes revolutions, we need rebellion. We need that. But often seems a little misguided and not super grounded and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I notice right now just in having this exploration with you guys, I'm starting to just be like, oh, we're going so broad. I'm curious how I can be a better conversational buddy here and for folks listening to be more um, directive in going deep into some of these things and maybe have a little more bountiful harvest in our containering together than just going all over the universe on a surface level. And bookmark at statutory law, and taxes and shit too. That's the thing. And the like meta unplug. Those are two things that I flagged.
Mm. Yeah, I noticed it's whenever the topic comes up around the um the fraught nature of revolution, and in particular the way that left-wing radicalism over the last century, uh like where that Sorcerer's Apprentice, like what ended up happening there when the Sorcerer's Apprentice kind of like got unleashed. It's like there's a particular sadness in me that is so big. And I noticed that actually I hadn't been connecting this, but um yeah, actually it's a huge ongoing fear that I have in doing internal work um and doing like spiritual development, is this fear that I am either already or soon to be self-deluded in such a way that I will be like um yeah, convinced that something is right, and just because the Matrix says not to do it, that doesn't, that shouldn't matter. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm this like free spirit who has done all the work and is just so high consciousness that
Mm-hmm.
there's actually no peer in the Matrix that is able to judge me and my moral decisions, and then I'm going to do something bad, not good. And that is like, I'm, I think if we make that, boil that down really practically, that kind of fear, I think um it is a brake pedal on my own personal development and spiritual growth and escape, like reaching escape velocity is like yeah, like you're saying, a need for community to so that I know, like, I'm not fucking up, right? Like, I still, there's some part of me that needs others' perspective, that I'm not fucking up, that I'm not doing something bad.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, and that finding community of people who actually have the perspective you can trust is like super hard too. And I don't know, I'm kind of sitting
Yeah.
there, and I think that is like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really motivated to make that turn and be like, we're living totally at choice with our play in the Matrix, and like I'm going to live
Hmm.
entirely outside, and I'm going to go in at choice when I need something that just happens to be in there. Um, and that to me is the big limit, is like, how do I trust myself?
I imagine that you having a history with drugs might play into that. And like, and some extreme examples are like, people who like found the secrets of the universe in a K-hole over 17 months, like locked in their, one bedroom apartment or whatever. Like there's no shortage of those stories of like, somebody like gets a sensory deprivation tank in their like one bedroom flat and just like does ketamine for 8 months because they think they like found something, like that happens. That for sure happens.
I need to get my to-do list real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, it's super interesting what you're saying. And it brings up for me two things. Like one is the lack of community and like being in circle together. And even if we are knowing what to do and like the wisdom of embodiment and unarguable stuff and like learning about projection and just how to do circle work, basically. Like that's one thing. And then the other is like the wisdom body and like the breakdown of lineages and rites of passage and this like fundamental kind of issue with our maleness, uh, and how the like wisdom body of man as a lineage, like an unbroken lineage up until like a little while ago is another thing that I think also like liberates something that could have some upside in a way, but maybe is actually pretty dangerous. That like if men were initiated into adulthood by men who were initiated into adulthood by men since the beginning of time, and then all of a sudden not that, yikes. Like what does that mean? Like what are the consequences of that? Right. And we talked about this recently, and for listeners, there's like, there's this fundamental thing where we could frame it as like we're all born into the realm of mother inherently. And then for males, we could say that the process of maturing into manhood is one of leaving the realm of mother and entering into the realm of father, or like leaving the realm of woman and going into the realm of man, where you have to, care more about your purpose and providing safety for yourself and those you love or are responsible for, instead of like comfort and ease and like good feelings or something, to be very overly simplistic, but still, I think to the point here. And because we don't have that, what happens? That we end up with a bunch of boys who are living in the realm of woman and take on a view of man and masculinity that is very often their mother's corrupted and traumatized misunderstanding of maleness and masculinity and a negative view of men. And I think this is one of the most consequential factors of our lives. And I think that a lot of people are trying to describe this by calling it patriarchy in a way that I think actually perpetuates the thing that we're talking about, which is kind of ironic and shitty, but like it's interesting, right? Because it's like, well, damn, it seems like that's what's going on. And Robert Bly talks about this in Iron John. He talks about how the Industrial Revolution really put pressure on this thing, and that because we don't grow up seeing our father's daily lives, then there's potentially this like projection of the like demonic nature of man. Because it's like and it's like you don't get the personality of your father or his lifestyle, you just get his like demeanor when he's tired. And then there's this kind of mysteriousness of like who's that guy and what is he doing all day? And then when he comes home, he's just kind of tired and grouchy. And then we are living in the realm of our mother who has, who's, let's just call it like she's like underfucked and not emotionally and relationally met and has her own trauma and father wounding that's being projected on her husband. And then her children are being indoctrinated in that. And that's the lens in which they see manliness or manhood or masculinity. And then I'm supposed to grow up to be like that. Like that seems shitty. Like, oh fuck, like maybe I need to be something else. And then we have the feminization of men and this kind of pervasive anti-male sentiment and the perpetuation of both the mother wound and the father wound that's just spinning out of control. It seems like that, there's a good case for that story being a relevant factor in what's going on in the fabric of our world. And I think that is a matrix, right? Like that is a matrix of all kinds of different. And if we could define matrix, maybe that would be fun for people. And like, just to roll with the energy here, one way that I could attempt to define it is like, what are the thoughts, feelings, beliefs, behaviors that correlate with like a certain sphere that is prevalent culturally? And how do these different spheres exist on various layers of our society, and how are people enrolled with it and identified with it and might think that that's reality rather than a particular matrix of thoughts and beliefs and incentives and power and enrollment and all this sort of stuff, right? Like that, maybe we should have started the conversation with this piece of like, what does this even mean? So, like that is a thing. So when I talk about the matrix of our sexual culture, that's what I mean, is that like there is a like a superset of thoughts, feelings, beliefs, behaviors, incentives, influences that people are enrolled in and kind of take for granted as being essential rather than cultural, basically, is like one way that I could frame that, right? And the one thing that, is a premise, a foundational premise in the work is that like probably everybody, and some people might say like some people are asexual or whatever. It's like, yeah, statistically, those don't even round to 1% of the population. So like, yeah, those people exist. And like, let's move on. So like, yes, like maybe it's not everybody, but it's most people. And I think if pretty much everybody, I think, agrees, or let's even call it 95%, that having a great sex life is a part of their dream reality. And the amount of people that I think would say in their heart of hearts that they feel truly sexually fulfilled in this current moment and over the arc of their existence, it's almost no one. So clearly the matrix that we're operating inside of, or as I call it in the work, the sexual operating system that we're using, which is basically just another frame of like the thing that you're doing to interface with the matrix or to keep it going, doesn't work very well. If everybody says this is important and nobody has this, like, okay, like that's interesting. Um, yeah, I forgot where I was going with that, but just kind of laying that out as stuff related to the matrix and how this relates to like our essence or who we really are and the naturalness of being and what is actually meaningful and valuable, which my mind jumps back to this thing of like, are we creating our own game, or are some authority figures somewhere somehow creating this? Or if we get a little more spooky, is it like evil forces that are not particularly embodied, but are nonetheless factors? And this makes a lot of sense if we even go to like the Hindu cosmology and the Kali Yuga and all this stuff of like, are we just in a super matrix where consciousness forms this way, or at least within the probability scape of the construct, it's highly likely that those are the patterns that are going to manifest here. Like that's interesting, right? Like is there another layer on like a more spiritual level of the matrix, these like forces that have a certain kind of density and intentionality, or maybe beings themselves, right? Like, I mean, it gets real weird if we start to look at like, what are we even talking about, right? So, yeah. Yeah, I'll pass it back to you guys. I could keep jamming here, but it seems like it's getting a little swirly.
I have a burning share.
Oh, please.
I feel like I'm in a debrief. I have a burning share. There's I think I'm like 98% aligned with you on what we mean by by the matrix or a matrix. And I really like the way you outlined sort of um a really big difference when there is a really big difference between what we would say would be how we want things to be and then the way things just happen to play out for almost everyone, then you're feeling a contour of you're like in a matrix and you didn't realize it. There's like that's like a good heuristic for like, oh shit, I'm probably inside a matrix right now. And it reminds me of in pro wrestling, there's this term kayfabe, which is like kayfabe is the storyline that everyone pretends is real. Like even the audience who all knows it's fake, they all cheer as if this guy is evil. Even though that's like probably a nice guy, but we know he's playing evil, but we're like, yay, he's bad. Um, that's like kayfabe, and often I notice like when there's ideology at play, there's like a kayfabe element to where if I really check, it's like the thing I say is true isn't actually in my heart of hearts the truth, and I like know that on some level, and am participating in the game through that lie. It's the dishonesty around that, or it's maybe dishonesty might not even be the right word. It's the like mislabeling or whatever that gets me purchased into the game, and I'm like not even clearly tracking when I'm doing that. And I think
Can you
that's
give
like
an
a
example? Can you give an example?
um yeah, so like so an example might be I this happened a lot like when I was in my say like in my youth, and I would be going out with the boys and it's like, oh, all right, I'm gonna go try to get laid. And it's because like that's what I want to do. And then it's like, if I really would search it, it's like that's actually not quite the thing that I want, but that is like the labeling it of as that gets
Right.
me into the game.
Yeah, but do you think that that's related to like other drivers that like you want to be seen in a certain way or you want a certain kind of status? Because I think that these, they're that gets funny, right? Because I think that like a lot of people do actually just want sex, but it's hard to get. Or you look cool when you say that, or you look
Mm.
cool when you get that. Like if you have the Rolex or the trophy wife or the Lambo or whatever, or like the huge muscles. But then people, a lot of people get the Lambo and the trophy wife and the huge muscles, and they're not in any way fulfilled. They're just, have really high levels of cortisol and are pretty delusional and not fun to be around. So that's also an interesting thing. And then I can even add the like meta card of Buddhism of just like existence is suffering. So how about that? It's like this frame of like, oh, like the craving and aversion piece is just like an intrinsic part of being, and it's a crapshoot. So just, you know, Hanicca.
Well, couldn't you just zoom out a little and say that any utterance or like way of engaging in the world that isn't, you know, like looked at with a almost like a third perspective awareness and like is part of the matrix. I mean,
Yeah. That kind of
or
goes back to
something.
your transparency point about
Hmm.
like any time there isn't like
A non-dual like awareness of what you're I mean, we're just operating in the world all the time, and if you really think about like yeah, I don't know, yeah, sorry.
well, I'm just thinking about like that transparency point about like having so much alignment between like you're able to so authentically and in alignment express what is actually the yearning and unfolding of your inner self. If you do have that transparency, there's a way that you're no longer in kayfabe at all. You're like totally you're
I mean
so
it
aligned that it's like
I mean you'd probably just sort of disappear.
right.
It would literally so
Right.
transparent that you just kind of become a light body and disappear. Like if it were really that clean. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
like the ultimate like city of transparency, you know,
Hmm.
but there's so many levels in between.
Mm.
Yeah, and then this question of like, do we want that? Right? Like, do we actually want that, or do we want to be identified with this human experience? Because I think that that's what it kind of points to. And
Yeah.
this piece of like exiting the matrix, or when do we actually just want to be more ordinary? But this is kind of breaking our definition of what the matrix means, right? Because we could go into like, what is the matrix of like thoughts, behaviors, incentives, whatever that just correlate to like biological drivers fundamentally. Like, that's an interesting thing to think about. Like, what is the matrix of that? Just like safety, security, status, reproduction. Because if you look at someone like Andrew Tate, for example, he uses the word matrix a lot, and he's a controversial dude, very polarizing. Uh, Seems like a lot of people love the guy and a lot of people don't. And just as a case study, if we were to be like, okay, if our goal is to just focus on safety, security, status, and reproduction, then like somebody who has like 20 kids and $500 million and a bunch of supercars and like an army of security detail with high powered weapons and provides for all of his baby mamas to, just have fun or whatever, or whatever I don't know. I mean, I have no idea what his life is like, but I'm just saying, like, in that way, it's just kind of like, oh, that's interesting to be like, okay, I'm just like optimizing metrics, like within this kind of superstructure of like my biological and, I think this just gets overly simplistic, right? Because it's like, I don't think that that's actually how people work. There's like way more mythopoetic basis and like deeper incentives and things that are much more colored than just like the metrics of these particular stats or something. So we're in a matrix. That is a matrix. That is a whole spell, a whole story, a myth that we were raised in. And there's this premise that like there are other people that have authority over our existence. That's basically the premise.
Yeah.
There are these organizations, there are these corporations, there are these people who assume authority over our lives. Why? Right? Like maybe they have interest that doesn't align with our own. Maybe it's just legacy, an accident, tradition. In any case, you probably want to get out of it.
Yeah,
uh,
or be at choice. It reminds me, there's this really good podcast, Fight Like an Animal, where he does a lot of biology. He's like an anarchist whose main framework is biology. And he talks through the like, imagine the first guy who wanted people to make a statue of him. Like the first leader who's like, make a statue of me. Like that guy is like obviously psychotic. Like not.
yeah, but there's a good chance that that guy, I mean, I have no idea if this is true, but like maybe, the patriarch just had people who adored him wanted to make a statue out of him or about him when, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
maybe it wasn't a crazy guy. Maybe it was just like that dude's fucking awesome and he saved our lives. And like,
yeah,
hell, he's
but
the wisdom keeper and the protector of our tribe. And like, he just died. So let's fucking commemorate him or whatever. I don't know. I'm just kind of like, immediately my thought is like that, leadership is powerful. And like, I feel like the provision of leadership is something that people really regard, but I'm interrupting you. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah, well that the idea is that there is like there on small scales there is an immediate interpersonal sense of like authority claiming imperious like psychotic style person like with everyone has had the like in an early job had a manager who just like
Power trip.
was
Yeah.
psychotic like like Mussolini or like a principal or something in school.
Totally.
Um in interpersonally it's so obvious, but then get millennia into a game called civilization,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden the assumption that people have authority over you is like so baked into the cake. You don't
Yes.
have
Yes.
you don't have like that interpersonal first meeting.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so crazy because like I think that this is literally all stacked on top of fear of violence. The whole thing. The whole entire thing is stacked on top of fear of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
why else would we be doing this? Like, it's not very fun. Like, why else wouldn't we just be like, no, like,
Right.
oh, no, I'm not doing that.
And I mean, victim mindset, right? Which I guess you could backtrack into like
It's kind of a
like
fear of
fear of
violence.
violence. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, like if people are like, hey, do what I say, if you're just like, no, thanks, you know,
Yeah,
like,
right.
now what?
Right. That goes back to the like I didn't even know I could say no. I didn't even know I could say no to that.
Right.
Like I know, I mean, that was me. There's like so many of the close people in my life are like, you know, I didn't know I could say no to that, or they're making me do it, or it's making me be this way, or you know.
Yeah.
That's something you hear a lot in like the horror stories in the fallout from cults breaking up. A
Yes.
huge amount of the like they were forced to do something. When you actually look at the story, it's like, oh, you were entirely at choice the whole time. It's just you were in a matrix that was highly unhealthy and coercive on this like secondary level thing. But like actually like nobody made you do any of this stuff. You like
Yeah, but there's a line there, right? Because like if we start talking about like 18-year-old girls like having sex with like the CEO of the company or whatever, it's like where's the
Yeah.
line there? You know what I mean? It's like it's like yeah, she gave consent or whatever, like nobody forced her, but like really, you know, like it's not so clear. Like there's so much gray when we start to look at that sense of like where's there accountability and how does power play in, and uh the perception of valuable opportunity or the consequences of rejection or whatever, like that, you know what I mean? It's like there's really big like meta influences that I think kind of make it hard to just suggest that people are that have agency like that. And like I fully agree with you that it would be cool if we just fully took responsibility for everything in our lives. And then when I think about like circumstances and people in positions of power and influence and naivete and immaturity, and it's like
Ancestral.
yeah, totally. I mean, it gets there's so much gray. Like there's so much like yeah, that's clearly like off the rails, and like yeah, that's totally fine, but like there's a lot of gray. Like a lot. If we look at cults or we look at sex or power or consent, or you know, it's like
right, but I think the looking at something like cults, like the point isn't to be like, oh, this person did that to themselves or whatever. It's to self-analyze, where am I actually fully at choice, but I have just bought into the leaders like game. And like actually I every culture, you can't spell culture without anyways. There's like there's this way that yeah, I want to find all the ways I am in a cult right now and then be at choice. And it actually like if I am the 18-year-old making this choice with the CEO, it's like for me, I want to know as soon as possible where I'm at choice and my options, and like rather than using that analysis as a way to like take cult leaders off the hook. It's like, yeah,
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense.
cool. I'm into
That's
that.
a good clarification. I really liked your
just
ceremony.
just so I'm on the record.
You're like, that's what I'm doing actually.
I love
Yes.
that. Totally. You're like, how am I on the hook? Not how are they off the hook, you know?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love
It's great.
that actually sounds really true, and I never got that about you. It sounds funny, but I've had this thing before, Rob, where Jonathan will be, you know, all pro cult and like, oh, and like negative to the cult followers, and I'm like, but there's all the gray, and now I actually see it in a like in him a way that I didn't see before. So I'm really glad that we had this moment.
That makes us watching cult documentaries a lot smoother from now on.
No more pause it. What the hell are you talking about? That is not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, like what are the mini cults of our own relationships, for example? Like how are you in the cult of Sai and how is she in the cult of Jonathan over there too? Is like that's a juicy one. We don't need to go there, but it's just like it's interesting, right? Because I think the entanglements and where our adaptive children play with each other and we don't see it as such and all that is it's important. I know in my own life the layers of disillusionment have been several. They'll probably keep coming, you know, like, oh shit, yeah, that's another thing I didn't see. Yeah, I had a music and Alexander technique session scheduled with Dave Cox, but he's sick.
Shout out.
The sessions that we do together are amazing. He's a fucking wizard. It's incredible. It's so casual and so effective. It's amazing. Like we just chill and like sing songs and fuck around, and it's like I'm just so visibly developing as a musician. It's amazing. He's so good.
Love that.
Yeah, the Alexander technique is good shit. Anyways, we got things. We got open loops.
Yeah. Why don't you close some loops for us? You've been taking notes, and it feels like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of things that I kind of like feel or remember on a body level that I'm not cognitively remembering and don't have on this cute little legal pad here, but let's see. This kind of like meta unplug thing is around. And then talking more about the law stuff, there may be some stuff to just ground that in of where people can find more information because it's been revolutionary to feel like on a certain level this I'll put it like this. Like one of my marketing mentors was like, if you make over $250,000 a year, 4 to 6 months of the year, you're working for the government, which is insane, especially with like what those people do. It's like, what do they do with all this money of ours? It's like not things that I feel particularly good about, I think. Yeah, a lot of it's mysterious and some of it just seems like a charade in the first place, but it's like, whoa, that's insane to think about like 4 to 6 months out of the year, you are not even working for your own benefit. Like, you know, 6 to 8 months out of the year, you work to make money for yourself and your family. And then the other time you're working to support that thing. 4 to 6 months out of the year, you're working for them. Nuts, right? Holy shit. So, you know, there's a legacy around war tax resisting, which is interesting. I was first introduced to that idea many years ago where people would deliberately evade taxes and then they would make anonymous voluntary donations to different branches of the government and non-government agencies. And they would even like hire accountants to like be like, oh, how much would I pay to like education or whatever, transportation or health? I mean, I was going to say healthcare, but we don't have healthcare. So fuck that. It's not even there. What are we doing with all this money? It's just like fucking, you know, subsidization of things that are weird and the military industrial complex and all that. It's like, okay, that's what I'm working for 6 months out of the year, supporting that. It's like, yikes, I don't want to do that. That's not really aligned with my values. But if I don't, they're going to take me to jail or take my shit. Okay, I guess I'll do it for 6 months out of the year. It's like, oh my God, like that sucks. Like that premise is so fucked of like, okay, I'm alive. There are these other men and women who are going to come take my shit or put me in a cage if I don't work for them 6 months out of the year. And they're like, okay, Okay. Call it whatever you want to call it, but that's what's going on, right? Okay. Whoa. That's pretty intense. It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense. So spending time with this is like, I think it's difficult for people to often like something that I've observed, and I think this totally makes sense, is that like if something is very uncomfortable for people, but there's nothing that they can do about it, that we just, or we think there's nothing that we can do about it, that we just kind of normalize that feeling and kind of rationalize it, or it just goes away. And to pivot really quick to talking about sex, I've seen this with my own eyes, or at least think I have, that over and over and over again, and having conversations about the work that I do with men, and just affirming to them that like this feeling that you have that your sexual life is not right, and like you're suffering because of it, is correct. Like trust that feeling. It's like no one has ever, it's almost like there's like this big fucking, you know, like treasure chest that Johnny Depp kind of dug out of the bottom of the ocean or whatever, that like nobody has ever even acknowledged existed. Never mind said it was okay to like open that box, or to maybe offer a better metaphor, to like take it seriously, to take yourself seriously enough to be like, this is important and I'm suffering and this sucks and I want it to be different. Right. Like I think that most men are just like, with the immensity of their sexual yearning and desire, and that how important that is for them. And they have no way of reconciling that feeling. So they just bury it. They just bury it. They avoid it. There's no validation of the legitimacy of it. There's no solution to change the situation. So what am I going to do? Just ruminate? Like, no, that's terrible. And I got shit to do. And it breaks my heart. And I would just, it would kill me if I just felt that heavy thing on me all the time. So I'll get it where I can, and maybe do porn or whatever it is to have some relief of that, or to interface with that a little bit in some place where I feel safe enough to, and not shamed or afraid or overwhelmed by all the things that come up there. So yeah, anyways, as it relates to this piece around statutory law and corporate law and tax liability and everything, it's like I think everybody just assumes that, like, even if that is horrific, that I have to work 4 to 6 months out of the year for like or these people are going to come and take my shit or put me in a cage, is insane. But what am I going to do? There's nothing I can do about it. So I'll just forget, or try to, and pretend that that's not real, or whatever. Like just, it makes sense. It makes sense that people are not like with this as much. And I think it often relates to the fact that it's never been presented like that. It's like, this is the reality, you know, uh, 30 to 60% of your income is not yours, because you agree to this system. You agree to this premise. You assume that they have jurisdiction over your life, and you're not aware that you can opt out of that. You're not aware. And because and this is the thing about this is like the state of New York and the land that I live on are not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important. Like you live on land, and you are a living man and a living woman. That is not, I'm a citizen of the state of Virginia. You guys live in Virginia, right? So like, I'm a citizen of the state of Virginia. These are all words that are terms within statutory corporate law. They're not real.
Wow.
You guys know about the game A, game B thing? You know about that whole premise? That like basically our hardware, or maybe it's our firmware, who knows? But like, we know how to get along in tribal bands of like 100 to 150 people. I think it's called the Dunbar number, that this is just like a part of our nature as pack animals, that we can live in that size group. And if it gets bigger than that, it splits into like 2 or 4 factions, even if it's peacefully, is my understanding. Like this is what anthropologists have found, that like people just we don't organize in bigger groups unless we like make up shit like governments and organization. And this whole thing called civilization is just people trying to figure out how to get along in bigger groups than 150 people. And that requires all this shit that we could call like political science and government and military and economics and yada yada yada. I mean, I'm sure economics exists and leadership and stuff like that exists on like tribal levels, of course. But yeah, I mean that's interesting to think about. Like if you just try to like get along, if like we have a global tribe of 8 billion people and everybody just needs to get along, like that's a very involved thing to pull off, you know? So, you know, that there is something that I think is interesting around like it's fucking hard to like do a like weekend retreat with 8 friends. You know what I mean? It's like it's a lot. It's like you gotta. There's a lot of shit to deal with. It's like life is complicated when you like you know the complexity of large systems is real. It's real. It's real. It's full on. So yeah, I don't want to in any way like be fantastical about like you know anarchy is is amazing, but you know anarchy usually is attributed to like gutter punks and like a lack of wellness or something in most people's mind and symbolism. But I guess I just wanted to like, you know, the premise of like statehood or whatever, or like large scale organizations and institutions, I think is I just don't want to be too quick to just be like, oh, that's all like fucked or whatever, because maybe it is in this context, but I think that it's if we look at the history of it, is like, what would you do? Is like another group of people that were better at organizing would come like steal your wife and kids and kill you and steal all your shit. You know, like that's probably what, you know, in the evolution of consciousness and this kind of thing of like greed and scarcity and power and violence and all that. It's like we needed, if not need or will need these kind of systems and remedies and insurance.
There's like years of conversation I want to have with you on these exact topics, but we're like we butted up again against time.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if before you go, if you could just in a single sentence say your meta unplug before
Okay.
you unplug.
In a single sentence.
As the go home. Yeah, I'm curious if that's a fun game.
What? What's your imitation again? Can you say it again?
In a single sentence, say your the last kind of note
Oh,
we had
got it, got it, got it. I remember what
in
you're talking about now.
unplug.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool, cool. This is kind of the same thread that Sai was talking on before. You know, there's like the self work, you know, like something around identity. Um, let's see if I can sentence it. What I have seen is that these the processes of identifying with thoughts, beliefs, whatever, like that process of identity formation that keeps us in all these matrices is something that exists within our embodiment. And I don't just mean physically. I mean like, you know, the five bodies thing is a good model. Whatever, like we are unconsciously mostly perpetuating or constantly iterating on an identity forming process that keeps us involved in being. And self-realization, if we were to really look at like the ultimate goal of spiritual practice, or at least like certain kinds of Eastern ones like Buddhism or Hinduism are two that I find a lot of resonance with. The aim is like a self-realization that is not about all that shit. That is like, what am I? Oh, you know, I am the awareness of being, or I am, whatever. Like that. we could call the process of like getting to know how to traverse that in a way that is not encumbered by cognition, or I could say self-deception, but that's impossible, relatively at least. Is I think like that's the real ride, right? Like that's the real journey, is like understanding how we are participating in consciousness. Like how can we take responsibility for what we are doing within that identity forming process, which is a kind of creativity, it's a kind of ontology. We are an ontology, I mean like related to being and doing. There are these invisible processes and forces and yeah, things that are going on within the self, or the individual self, or the meta self, or the higher self, or the soul, or whatever, becoming identified with an individual form, and the various layers of that that are keeping us enrolled in these matrices. And I think this is what mysticism is. Mysticism is exploring that. And it can be approached like as an engineer, kind of reality hacking, or it can be approached more like trance, or something that's much more shamanic and like mythopoetic and like woozy, like trance-like, or it can be much more like sharp, you know? So I think that the meta unplug is mysticism, let's call it. Like the way of taking responsibility for being in relationship with, playing around with, journeying with an intelligence and an agency that is beyond all of this.
Beautiful, brother.
Yeah, I mean that's the sauce.
I like that we arrived at mysticism. That feels like a good um
Yeah, and I mean maybe this would be a fun, I mean it seems like we have a tradition here. But it seems like maybe this would be a place that we could maybe swiftly, if we want to. I can look at my calendar in the next weeks, but maybe we could hop right in again and talk about get back in the container. Get back in the container. And
Let's do that.
yeah, just start from there, because I think that this is a place that I would say is in my zone of genius, is being able to communicate about these things, or at least jam around them with more or less organization, depending on what ends up happening, in ways that can demystify mysticism, so to say, or make it pretty practical and tactical, and give people things that are really clear and like what they can do actually. And another part of my passion and something that I see, let's say, or it seems to be a part of who I am in the way that I work on an essential level, is to play around with how this relates to sex and emergent interpersonal phenomenon, let's call it. And I know you guys too, you know, I think a lot of this like AR circling sex stuff is like under the umbrella of emergent interpersonal phenomenon very broadly. And that is a playground and microcosm that I think, depending on people's proclivities and interests and capacity, is of the most legible, functional, and fun contexts or arenas for playing around with this stuff. You know, like it's super energizing to be like, oh, I don't want to like sit and meditate and like understand the self, but like I want to fuck somebody, you know, like I want to make love to my wife. Like that sounds good. And yeah, you know, so I think that there's a lot of inspiration, and there's a tremendous amount of use and value and like beauty on the other side, and pretty quick returns on it. So yeah, I could say more, but maybe we'll leave it here.
yeah. Tell the people where they can find you.
Oh yeah. I think it depends on when this gets published because we're undergoing a big launch. But robkancler.com, ROBKANCLER.com is a place. And Rob Kancler at Rob Kancler on various socials, Instagram, you can find me. Yeah, I'm around.